Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Piersanti. I'm a senior editor at Barrett Kohler Publishers, and I have had the pleasure of being the editor working with Heather on this book. You're seeing me in my home office. I've been an editor now for 38 years, so I've accumulated a lot of manuscripts and book proposals, a lot of paper, but it's an authentic home office. So it is a great pleasure for all of us to be able to hear from Heather Younger, talk about the art of caring leadership. I would ask everyone to mute your microphones except for me and Heather and Nikki. Please go ahead and mute your microphones. As you have some people who need to mute, I think now I would ask you to mute.
Yes, if everybody could mute besides just Nikki, I, and Steve, that would be great. Then it would make it easier to more smooth for everybody else.
We're going to ask you to put your questions in the chat area, and then the last 15 minutes today we will we'll do a Q&A, and I will read questions from the chat. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now, so in terms of the art of caring leadership, caring leadership is taking daily leadership actions that show concern for or kindness to others. And what's really amazing about this book, what is so impressive to me, is it's just full of actionable, specific behaviors, not abstract or nebulous or wishy-washy. It's how to actually put into practice this concept, and I think that's an amazing dimension of the book that really separates it out and makes it so useful. Heather she's going to tell us more about her bio, but she has a law degree from the University of Colorado Law School. Then she had a distinguished corporate career and government career, including being the head of organization development for a large local government. She founded her own firm in 2015, and since then she has been a speaker, a trainer, a podcaster, consultant, working pretty much in this area. So with that, I'll turn the time to her. Again, ask everyone to mute your speaker, everyone who's on the call. And as you have questions for Heather, enter them in chat, and we will have a Q&A period at the end to go through your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop for one moment because I think I have the ability to, oh no, there we go. Okay. I think everyone's muted now. Fantastic. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm a business branding and marketing strategist. I have the honor of working with Heather on her book launch. I believe, Heather, you have many people here who know you and know your work, but some of you may be just starting to learn about Heather and the incredible work that she does for the first time. Heather, the first time I spoke with you, shared with me a little bit about what led you to do the work you do today around caring leadership. Would you mind sharing some of that story with us?
Yes, it's interesting because some people say, well, I want to go back to my childhood when I was in the cradle, right? And it really does have a lot to do for me with how I show up now has to do with how I started kind of early on in life. And so you'll see here, yes, that's me, like nice chunky chunk samurai right there with my mom. And then this is all three of us, happy family. I'm the only child. And so when I grew up, my mom is white and she's Jewish. My dad is Black and Christian. And when I was growing up, well, early on, my grandmother on my mom's side of the family and that side of the family wasn't really receptive to the marriage at all. And so much so that when I was born, I was kind of a constant reminder for them of what they saw as a mistake. And it was a reminder to their community. And so to that extent, I wasn't invited to any family gatherings that had anybody outside the immediate family. My pictures weren't on the walls like my other cousins were. And so for a long time, I felt so much like I didn't have a voice, that I wasn't listened to. I wasn't important. I wasn't valued. And so after about 10 years of living in Ohio and living with that family, my family move to Ohio or move to Las Vegas. And as I'm moving to Las Vegas, I get there, and a lot of I had some things that I held on to from my childhood. Like I celebrated both Hanukkah and Christmas. I celebrated both Easter and Passover. And I had an aunt, my mom's baby sister, who had this kindness about her, where when I went to Las Vegas, even though I was kind of separate from that family, she still sent me big boxes that had 8 gifts in them for me to unwrap, one for each day of Hanukkah. And I thought that was just such an amazing thing. And she did it over the years. I don't even remember when she stopped. And for me, that was the first kind of real sign for me of a caring leader. She cared for me, and she showed me in her actions. So fast forward now, you see these pictures. These are my kids. So now I have 4 children. So I went from an only child to being 4 children, having 4 children, and then they are much older now. So they're all mostly like teenagers, except for the youngest, it's 10. And they are kind of a new why for me, to make sure that I raise them to make sure they feel heard and listened and cared for and important, right? And so the work that I do now, how I show up, you fast forward some years, I was working in an organization where there was a merger of 5 companies, and I was leading customer experience at the time, but I saw the mistrust happening. I saw people were coming in with titles that sound dangerously like other people's titles, and people were getting very frightened. And I went to the head of HR and I said, listen, we have got to do something about our engagement, something about our trust. And she agreed, and she said, you should go do something about that. And I was like, okay, I'll go do that. I'm leading customer experience. I'll do it. But it made sense because I was already kind of the culture ambassador. I believe deeply in uplifting others. And so it was just one of those things. I brought people together. We started to see kind of the trust form and people understand each other. And then the merger happened, and it was not good. And there were big layoffs, and I was one of the people that was laid off. And it hurt during that time for me to go through the layoff. But at the same time, I found right there in that instance where people there needed to be a voice for others who were going through pain but didn't have a voice or weren't at the table. And so I kind of took on that role, and I realized right there that was my calling. I needed to be the one who helped other people listen more effectively and then use what it is they heard to drive them forward. And so that's where I'm at, today. That's the work I do. I help organizations listen more effectively to what their employees need, so that then they can use that to drive their culture forward. And I do that by helping them with aggregating employee survey feedback, helping them action plan and bubble those things up to the surface to help them improve their culture and engagement. I help them facilitate employee focus groups and culture teams and employee resource groups and affinity groups and anything like that, where I'm helping them to land on the truth for their organization. So this book just attempts to boil up the concepts of what caring leadership looks like, and the stuff that I'm, to be honest, already coaching clients to do and talking to organizational leaders about doing.
I love it. I think I muted myself. So this isn't your first book. So I'm really curious to learn why this book and why now?
Well, it's interesting because as we sit here in the middle of a pandemic and in the crazy times related to racial unrest and the divide that's here, I could not have foreseen that caring leadership would be this important right now. And so this book, I felt like now more than ever, I needed to be putting some meat on the bone of what caring means, or what leading with heart means. And I use those interchangeably. So you'll see Leading with Heart is the title of my podcast. You'll see Leading with Heart as a subtitle of this book. And it's because leading with heart and caring for me are one and the same. And so I'm trying to put more meat around what that means to teach leaders, like, this is exactly what it is you need to be doing if you want to be considered someone who cares. If you want your people to walk away with something that feels like something substantial. We all have been that person who has either worked for someone who we just felt like they embraced us with their care, or we've worked for someone who did the exact opposite and left us feeling not heard, not important, not cared for at all. And so this is, again, what I'm wanting to get to the bottom of is to really just put the mark down, put the stick down, and say, this is what caring leadership looks like.
I'd love to dig in and learn some more about some of the core concepts that you cover in the book. Would you talk us through some of those?
Yes. So the main focus here is that all managers really think that they care. And I'm gonna spell this out in some seriously clear ways in the book. Managers think that they care, but it's the actions and then how they leave their people feeling that really makes a difference. So it's the end user of that manager experience that actually determines whether they're caring or not. So that's going to be one of the concepts that pops out in here. The other one is that caring for those you lead first requires a desire and then an intention to go about doing the things we need to do to be more caring. Another one is that a prerequisite to becoming a caring leader requires that we are first aware of like the gaps or the holes we may be leaving for our people, for those that we lead. And then we have to have a desire to change and fill those holes for those that we lead. And so those, we'll talk about that, or that'll show up in the book, and there'll be other things that'll come out that'll demonstrate that even more, but that's really a big portion of it, is if you don't have an awareness, you don't have a desire to change, you can't then go about doing any of the things that I spell out inside the book. And then one of the last things is expressing care for those we lead is not some squishy, nebulous concept. There are actual things we do, and it produces hard line returns. I think of Gary Ridge, the CEO of WD-40 Company. He talks about his tribe and how he cares deeply for them and the things that he does to show the care. Daniel McCollum of Torrent Consulting, and he talked about literally making it a strategy in his business to be this type of leader and to make sure his managers are doing the same. And then Ron Alphastuffer, he is the CEO of Service Express. I think of him. These are just to name a few, but he talks about, I remember him specifically talking about how when he made the change from being like that person who, the manager, the leader who sits in front of his people and is just going through tasks and looking through timelines, to actually sitting and listening to them and showing that he cared, showing them that they are important to him in and of themselves, it made a huge difference in their revenue soared. And so the increased discretionary effort that employees give and the numbers, the hardline numbers that it produces, are other things that you'll see uncovered inside the book.
And I love that you talk about the returns piece, because that ties really nicely to some of the early feedback that you've already received from Kevin Kruse, who's the founder of LeadX and a New York Times bestselling author of Employee Engagement 2.0 and Great Leaders Have No Rules. And he says that caring leadership is the most important ingredient in employee engagement and retention. Want increased profits? Care for your employees first. Want better customer retention? Care for your employees first. Often it is hard to decipher what it means to care at work. This book presents fundamental principles that shows each and every leader the roadmap to caring leadership. And it strikes me that caring leadership isn't just kind of something that's nice to have. It really is a business imperative.
Oh, it's so true. And it's everywhere throughout the book. I make that quite clear. And I know a lot of people that might be on this call, maybe people who are already believers of this, but I think it's needed in the entire world. There are so many people who are getting this wrong, so many organizations that are getting this wrong. And unfortunately, they're paying the price for it. I think even now, and they'll pay for it for years to come, given the current place that we're at. Caring is no more important than today, given where we're at right now. So, yeah, so I think that's critical. The imperative is focused right there.
Absolutely. And there are a gazillion books on leadership out there. So I'm curious, what sets this book apart from other books?
You know, for me, it's the sincere effort to put a framework in place that gives people actionable steps to show that they care. Instead of it being this kind of nebulous thing that's kind of a nice to have, that seems kind of squishy to people, it actually says that these are the specific steps that we can take every single day. It's the small daily actions that we can take to show that we care. And so it literally gives you specific steps versus, again, just being out there. This person cares. Or what does care actually look like? In fact, I've actually taken quite a bit of time when I've left organizations and people reach back out to me and say, "Oh, you're my best manager, my favorite manager. You did this, you did that." I always follow up with them just to ask them why. It's not out of ego. It's out of pure curiosity to find out the things that I did. And you know what? Most of the things that I did were in this book. And so as I kind of went in, I guess there's a little bit of bias, but when I went into it and talked to all these different leaders, and it's, oh my gosh, it's there again. And it's also there in the employee engagement survey comments, all the thousands of comments I've read over the years. to see what it is that employees actually want from those that lead them. So yeah, it's kind of a wake-up call. One of the other things that I love about this book, and then I'm real proud to say that I'm not just focusing on Fortune 100 leaders or people with big names out there. These are everyday caring leaders and what they do every single day to touch the lives and uplift the people that are around them. So those are the biggest things that really set it apart.
I love it. And what about who this book is for? Who did you really write it for? Who did you have in mind when you wrote the book?
The main focuses were for managers, and managers could be supervisors or managers, leaders, and leaders would be like inside or outside of work. So people who consider themselves leaders, and whether you have a title or not. And so that could be someone in the home, it could be someone in their community, it could be anywhere. So anybody who identifies themselves that way. And then human resources is kind of an obvious one. They may read it, but then they may pass it down to all of their supervisory level people, or maybe even their aspiring leaders inside their organization, to get them started on the right track to caring leadership. And then lastly, the one that was actually a surprise to me, it wasn't my original intent, but Barrett Kohler was kind enough to send out my book to 3 independent reviewers. And I got the reviews I got back, they were great. Yes, I had constructive feedback, but one of the reviewers said, you know what, I see this, actually 2 of them said, I think this would be really helpful for consultants and coaches, because they can now take your thing that actually gives a framework and some actual principles for what caring leadership looks like, and walk their people through it with the guides that you're going to put together. So I was kind of delighted to see that there was another audience that was there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Final question for you. When you think about your vision for this book, what would you love to see happen in the future as a result of people reading this book and putting it into action?
Well, it's interesting. I put this right here on this slide, and this aspiration, it happens to be the subtitle of the book that we all came up with and we voted and everything. And it really is my dream to uplift teams and organizations globally by changing the minds and the behaviors of leaders everywhere. That's a big, lofty goal, but that's exactly what I intend to do. And so it's the idea that it's okay to express care. In fact, to achieve what we want in any shape or form at work, we need to make sure that we are caring for our people first. And it's predominant. I think of leaders, Phil Burgess, who refused to minimize the voices of his employees in his organization when he had to recommend changes. I think of Christine Johnson, who finds a way to let her leaders shine. I think of Larry Sutton, who put his trust in his people because he knows their strengths, and there's just many more people. I think of Rich Gasson, who recalled a story of one of his team members who was a volunteer football coach, and he could see he was struggling in that leadership role. And so Rich went out of his way to find training to make sure that he could do well, not in his current job, although it did help in that current job, but it helped him outside of work. And so he met him where he was at, and he looked at him as a full, whole person. So those are some of the stories, and I want those stories to impact other leaders around the world.
Fantastic. Right, I think we may have some questions, so I'll stop sharing my screen here. And Steve, did you want to pull some of those together for Heather?
Sure. This is a first one from Dennis Pitoko. And he says, do you agree that today's leaders must now become more visible, vulnerable, approachable than those of the past who hid in their corner offices?
I think that's a loaded question. Because I know Dennis, but yes, I think that's yes. Right now, I think that leaders have to have and show both empathy and strength, both compassion and clarity. And so those are the things I think they really need. So yes, I do. They're going to have to get out of their corner offices. They're going to have to engage. They're going to have to really feel what their people are going through, and they're going to have to meet them where they're at.
His follow-on question was, can this added skill set be taught? How do you teach this? How do you help people develop this skill set?
Well, as I said before, there's 2 things that have to happen. You have to have desire, and you have to have awareness. And so If they have both those things, then yes, it can be taught. And of course, that's what I'm intending to do in this book, is by laying out these 9 areas that they want to focus on and giving them specific stories and scenarios and tactics to use. It will help them grow in being caring. I do know where you might be going with that. Some people think that people automatically care, that there are certain people that are just more caring by nature, and you might be right, but I do think it's something that can be taught.
So a question, this is coming from Johanna von Delling on the Barrett-Kohler staff. What does a caring leader need to do differently in the age of COVID than what we did before?
I think kind of what Dennis alluded to earlier, which is they have to show up with a certain amount of strength or clarity and focus of like where the future's going, so that people can feel confident and comfortable in their leadership. But they have to show up with more listening and more empathy, more willingness to be vulnerable in their place with limits, and then also allow the other people to be vulnerable back.
And how do you do that in a virtual environment?
Well, I mean, it's possible to do it. I mean, I do coaching calls this way, and sometimes you have to go, you have to go deep. Just, I can see you right now. I can look into your eyes. We can have this conversation. It may not be that same sensory experience where I get to be in front of you, and you can kind of sense maybe even little micro movements, but I can see you pretty well. And I think you could see me too. And you can sense if I'm really listening to you.
Okay, thank you. This is from John LaFemina. Heather, what did you learn from your first book that helped you with this book?
Well, I learned that I'm glad I have more support on this book from the Barrett-Kohler team. I feel like I have it's a blessing because of that. You know, I feel like I don't feel like I'm a newbie. So I think that's, you know, just having that first one behind me knows that I can do it. I know I can get it done. I know I can write it. I know I can market it, right? So I think that part is the biggest learning, I think.
Okay, yeah, and I will just add that Heather was so impressive in what she did on her first book, which was self-published, that helped contribute to our decision to go ahead with this book, because she'd already done so many good things on her first book. She really brings a lot to the table as an author, and so we feel very fortunate to be working with her on this book. So this is a question from Joseph Kwan. How will organizations need to deal with leaders who are effective from a number standpoint, but toxic from a cultural standpoint?
Well, organizational handling, that really, I think, goes to values. And what happens often is organizations have values on paper, on walls, and some cool little marketing places, but they're not living them and they're not enforcing it. And so I think a big part of that is enforcing it through performance reviews, enforcing it on one-on-one, manager meetings. If they're seeing that toxic behavior, the organization has to have a culture that calls people on the carpet for it. So that's really the biggest one. Each individual manager might want to do it, but the organization has to support it by their values and their norms.
Okay, good, thank you. This is from Cheryl Simmons. Any surprise findings as you were putting the book together?
I think the thing that was early on, I didn't even think to write this. I didn't set out to do the podcast to write the book. So most people do it, they actually do that. I didn't. I just wanted to have heart-to-heart conversations with great leaders and uncover their brilliance. That was pretty much what it was. I got to maybe episode 25 and I'm sitting there going, holy smokes, like the stories of them not being perfect was actually the most compelling part. So listening into the stories of many of you right now that are on this call was the thing that made me go, oh my gosh, it is in that area where you're not perfect, that brilliance that shines through, that actually is the learning experience that we can share across the world. So I had this time of weakness. I had this time of not being such a perfect leader, but look what it is I did to come out of it. And it's what I did to come out of it, out of that area that also is brilliant. So that's what I would say. It's the biggest one. Okay,
good. Thank you. So Larry Sutton asked, where can we buy the books? And I'm going to answer this. The book is actually, the on sale date is not until next April. We're about 7 months away, 7 or 8 months away from when the book comes out. 9 months, I guess, 8 or 9 months away from when the book goes on sale. However, you can buy the book now on many different sites, such as independent bookstores. You can buy it at bnn.com, barnesandnoble.com. You can buy it at amazon.com. indiebound.com, various sites. You can order it now. And the game for book publishing has really changed in that pre-orders are now huge. And so what I tell people is, if you're interested in a book, don't wait until the publication date. Go ahead and pre-order it, because that's where the game is now on book sales. And you can do that now. You can pre-order it now. Okay, this is from Mike Crowley on the Barrett-Kohler staff. Can you care too much? Are there pitfalls a caring leader needs to watch out for? That's a great Mike Crowley question. If you knew him, you would expect that kind of a question from him.
Well, you know what? I actually love that. And that could be, that's one area I don't really address a whole bunch inside the book, and maybe it'll be something I add on to that. But caring too much, that's because I've really never seen too many leaders doing that. It's hard for me to answer that. But I think that if we were to say, for example, inside of one of the sub chapters or some sections inside of one of the chapters is obviously about empathizing. And if we empathize a little too much, or we, maybe even cross over to sympathy, then it could be too much, right? Because now we're sitting in front of them crying all the time. I had one of my daughter's teachers. She was an intelligent woman. She was a great person, but she cried like once a week in front of her students. And it was like, okay, what is wrong with this woman? And so it doesn't mean we can never show that we can never show that we care, that we can never show some of that emotion about a topic or something. But we need to make sure that, again, I talked about the balance between strength, compassion, strength and empathy. There's a balance there, and then we all have to strike it.
I'm gonna ask you to a question myself. Heather, share with us a story from the book, either from your life or from the book, that kind of exhibits how this theme of the book, that we have actions we do. It's not just an attitude. It's not just well, you called it what did you
the nebulous,
yeah, nebulous, right? Yeah, it's not just something nebulous or wishy-washy. There are things we can do, but shares with us a story that shows that of actually taking actions.
Well, I think one of them I shared earlier, and that was with Rich. Rich is on the phone right now. I have several I can come to think of, but that was one, and I may be wrong on all the specifics because I'm just taking off the top of my head, but he had a team member who happened to be a volunteer football coach, and he could see, and he was struggling. I don't know if he was getting bad feedback. I can't remember that, but he was struggling. The employee was struggling in that role. And so Rich saw an opportunity. He said, well, if I can help him become a better leader in this volunteer role, it wasn't in the role that he was supervising for, then it would also spill over into the work environment. And so he went out of his way and found, training for this gentleman to just become better in that outside role. And so where that falls in, or that story falls in, is this idea of meeting like the whole person, leading the whole person. It wasn't just him at work. It was what's going on with him overarching, and what are the things he's struggling with. And he met him right where he was at. So that's one just great story. And it's a specific one because it says, again, I'm not just going to sit across from you and hear you and then go la 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 and not listen. I'm going to actually go about my way, go about my time, looking for some resource for you to make you better. And I know if I make you better over here, I'm going to make you better holistically. So that's one story.
Good, thank you. Yeah. One of the things as editor that I've really liked about your book on this is that each chapter is about one specific action that you take in order to be a caring leader. Make them feel important, look for the greatness in them, involve them, lead the whole person, create a listening culture, provide them safe spaces, empower them to make decisions, build their resilience. And then under each of those main topics, you have many specific actions. How did you come up with this? How did you come up with this framework? How did you get here to these, which I think are so strong as giving it an action orientation instead of just, as you said before, a squishy orientation?
So a few of them surfaced in my first book, but what happened is, as kind of in Heather form, I used the voices of the leaders I interviewed. And so after like interviewing almost 100 of them, you start to see themes. And so I boiled up those themes up into these nine things, all the sub things that you can do, these actions, and there are plenty. And then on top of that, remember that I've had now 5 years of reading thousands of employee survey comments. So now I'm listening to what the leaders are saying and the actions they take, and I'm sniff testing it, really, reconciling it against what employees are saying they wish they had, or the things they did not have in those comments. And so that's what makes it, or I guess validates what it is that's in there. So that's how I was able to come up with it. And then the different sub areas that are even more specific actions of the stories, like I said, it came from these brilliant leaders.
Good, thank you. And you mentioned there the thousands of employee survey comments. Why have you read thousands of employee survey comments? That isn't something that people ordinarily do. In what context have you been doing that?
It sounds kind of bonkers, doesn't it? I think it boils back to my why. Not feeling heard, not feeling important, not feeling listened to, all those things, right? Early on, it just drove me throughout all of my management career to want to listen more effectively. And when I did that, when I really stopped to listen and kind of lean in to what my people were saying, I got more out of the relationship. They got more out of it. And so that's where it kind of started from. So that voice of the employee work I do, the stuff that's like reading all these comments, it basically is part of that work that I do. And I help organizations with the employee engagement survey comments that they have, or culture survey comments that they have. There could be thousands and thousands of those, and most of them don't have time to go through it. So it's my job to kind of scour through those and find some common themes, and then help them and their employees make a change in their culture that improves their retention and engagement.
And when you're saying thousands, that's not hyperbole. That's
not hyperbole. No, it is not. Nope. Thousands. Like about 20,000. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite a base of information to be research based, to be drawing on the book. So that's great. So one of the questions is one that I'm going to take, and the question is, are you planning an audio version of the book? And the answer is yes. And this is the book publishing has become. Courtney, who's the one who makes this happen, is holding up her thumbs. Good for you, Courtney. She's the miracle worker here that makes that happen. But so book publishing 20 years ago was a lot more simpler. A lot simpler, not more simpler, a lot simpler. You could just publish a print version of a book, and that was it. It was just print. And then we started doing ebooks. And then it wasn't just one ebook, but it was different versions. There's a universal PDF, there's an EPUB, and then the Kindle, which is a version of EPUB. And so you had multiple digital versions, ebook versions, and then along came audiobooks where we do downloadable audio, and that's become the fastest growing area of publishing. And so when we published the book in April of 2021, it will simultaneously be released in print, in multiple digital formats, and in audio format, all at the same time, all over the world, distributed by Penguin Random House all over the world. And so it's going to get out there in lots of different ways. What that means, though, is that the business of publishing has gotten infinitely more complex than it used to be. So I managed to get in my little group here. Okay. Heather, in your this is again from John LaFemina. In your conversations, have you come across examples where a leader can demonstrate caring by allowing their staff to fail gracefully, learn from that, and then productively move forward?
And are you saying, sorry, did you ask for a story of mine? Or is there a time when that can happen? Absolutely.
Examples, yeah. Have you any examples that come to your mind where a leader can demonstrate caring by allowing their staff to fail gracefully, learn from that, and then productively move forward? Can that be a path into caring?
Yes, I believe so. So, the thing about caring or leading with heart, I know that for some it may feel soft. It may feel like this nebulous thing, or just so much heart pouring over how do you actually get anything done? How do you hold people accountable? Or how do you expect things from people? And that's not what I mean, because you'll see in the side of the book that leading with heart is also being able to help people course correct. guiding them through tough decisions, or basically allowing them to take risks, to say, hey, this is your thing, go run with it. And if for some reason it doesn't go 100% well, I'm going to be there with you, and we're going to try to see if we can get through it together. And then if for some reason it doesn't go well, you're going to say, I know, yeah, I see it, but we're here together. And so how are we going to get through it together? Then there's absolutely a way to do it, and not demean them, or make them feel smaller because of it.
Yeah. So Kristen is correcting me, saying it's actually not quite available yet. Pre-order, probably another few weeks. It'll be available for pre-order, but still, many months, 7-8 months before the book comes out. Books are available for pre-order, and still, we really encourage all of you to go ahead and pre-order it when it is available. I'm going to ask, I can't believe that Marie-Suze and Katrine have not jumped in with this question yet, so I will ask it for them. And that is, to what extent is this relevant internationally? I just said that we will be selling it through Penguin Random House all over the world, and it'll go on sale all over the world on the same date. Is this just an American thing, or how much does it play in other countries? What are some other countries that you've used these ideas in? How's it different or the same in other countries?
Well, I mean, there obviously are cultural differences to some of these things, but most of these are very foundational principles. I remember my conversation with Dirk, who's originally, I believe, from Germany or Switzerland. So sorry if I'm saying that wrong, Dirk. But my conversation with him was all about love. And for him, love was like the cornerstone, and he and I really connected on that topic. And just yesterday, I did a talk to folks at Harvard Business Review, Brazil, and that'll be one of the markets I want to go to first. And they have taken quite a lot to the concepts of caring leadership, of leading with heart, of producing more positive emotions in the employees that they lead. So I think it's relevant everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It is relevant everywhere. And also, I remember last November when I was in the Mexican book fair, that was one of the things that they kind of material that they were looking for. It's not true every year, we have trends going, but conscious leadership, caring leadership is always, a universal concept, everywhere.
So that you've just heard from Maria Jesus Aguilo, who is from Spain originally and who has been for 20 plus years Berrett-Kohler's head of subsidiary rights, foreign language right sales, and is our head of international sales now. So thank you, Maria Jesus, for jumping in with that. So we within book publishing in general, and Berrett-Kohler in particular, I'm going to let out a dirty little dark secret right now. We often say within that authors write about what they themselves struggle with, that many of their books are addressing things that they are not particularly good at themselves, because I guess they work on it. But I'm getting here on the chat line, I'm getting people saying, well, that's actually not true of Heather. Heather this is from Emily. Heather is wonderful on the employee engagement side. She is not kidding about sifting through thousands of employee survey comments. So, you may be writing about something you're good at, not just something that you struggle with, as many authors do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, here's the thing. We all have our relative strengths, and this happens to be one of mine. I have lots of weaknesses, but this happens to be one of my strengths. So I felt like, wow, I should be giving this to other people.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a question from Sarah Elkins. We know this is right. We're preaching to the choir here. How do we get this into the hands of people who don't get this? The ones who think they're great leaders, managers, but their employees would seriously disagree. And you started out by talking about how everyone thinks that they are a caring leader. If you were to ask 100 leaders, probably 80 of them or 90 of them would say, yeah, I'm a caring leader. And so what is the distinction there between those who think they are, and how do you reach the people, the many who are not?
Well, I think that how we reach them, there's a couple different ways. Give it to them as a gift. A long time ago, I gave someone, a leader I know, a book that I really wanted them to read in a form of a gift wrapped up with a bow. and they read it and they thanked me later for it. And it really changed their entire mindset as a result of it. But the other thing is, for example, if it goes through HR, they can distribute that to their supervisors, but leaders can make it kind of required reading as part of a kind of a book club, learning within the team. And so you're going to have it in the hands of those people, whether they like it or not, because their manager is going to say, here, we're going to be doing a group thing. We're all going to be reading through this. We're going to, there'll be learning guides and study guides that will go along with this, that will be a part of it when it comes out. And so you can walk through each of the chapters and the things that you can do to improve. And then of course that can be part of even goal setting inside a performance review process for those managers. If that particular manager sees that there's a gap there, and they can help them fill it.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this question gets at what to me is the real brilliance of Heather's book. And that is that caring leadership, it can be viewed as something that everyone says, yes, I'm caring, but by making this all about specific behaviors, actual things that one does, actions, it changes everything. That do you make the people you work with feel important? Do you look for the greatness in them? Do you involve them? Do you lead the whole person? Do you create a listening culture? Do you provide safe spaces? Do you empower them to make decisions? Do you build their resilience? There's specific actions that are the focus of this book, and that really distinguishes it from just, oh yes, I'm a good person kind of view. So we're about out of time now, Heather. So I'm going to ask you to make a wrap-up statement. What would be kind of your wrap-up statement? Maybe your aspirations for the book, why you've done it, what difference you hope it will make, but whatever you'd like to share.
I mean, why I've done it is just, again, to share the brilliance from all the people I spoke to, that I continue to speak to on the podcast with everyone else, hoping that, as Sarah alluded to, it gets to the hands of people who actually don't express or exhibit care in how they lead their people. So that's my main thing. And of course, having you on here and having all of you in part of that will expand that, because hopefully you'll distribute these, you'll get some and you'll distribute it to people, and you can wrap it in a nice little bow, and you can do your study groups and your book clubs with them, so that they can hopefully do what Dirk talks about, which is put love really at the center of everything.
Very good. Thank you. And thank all of you for joining us. Let's
thank you, everybody.
Heather.
Yay!
Okay. And now